starting to put the transmission back in. I just kind of rolled my jack under there. Transmission's kind of sitting on it. And typically what I like to do, I'll get down here, give you guys some tips. A lot of these vans still on the road today, Caravans. A lot of people need to work on them sometimes, and you need to replace the transmission, and it's always nice to have a few tips, I guess. What I like to do is go ahead and get it up on the jack. If you have two guys that are pretty strong, you could probably just lift it up in there. But what saved me a lot of time is that axle housing there in the axle. I slid the axle in that housing as the transmission was kind of far, probably about 6 inches from the flywheel and stuff. I didn't have the transmission quite in there, just sitting on the jack. And I just slid that axle in there as I pushed the jack toward, let me try that one more time. I pushed the jack with the transmission on it toward the engine, and that axle slowly went back in there, and it's all the way in the axle there. So I should say the axle's all the way in the transmission. Then once I got it kind of started, it takes a while to kind of get the transmission adjusted, to get the dial pins just right. And when you get the dial pin there, the little ears, you can put a bolt in it and get it started and just kind of tinker around. And I got one started up on top. And the idea is when you put the transmission in is try to get it at the same angle as you take it out. You can kind of see it sitting at an offset angle kind of with the motor. And that's the whole key to mate the transmission with the engine block, I should say. Then you got to get your bolts kind of lined up. And if you can get one started in, and if I go back up on top, and I have one up here started, which is, now this wiring harness is in the way. I'll have to unhook it for a second, but there's a secondary bolt that I've already started in the block in the transmission, which is right there. See that bolt right there? I've got it kind of started, and you don't want to tighten them up all the way. And if you can get them pretty snug, and you know your transmission's kind of bolted in, at least you know it's started, then you come over here and start your motor mount, transmission mount I should say, put your bolts in it, and then you can jack that up a little bit more, and then put in your big bolt there for the transmission mount, which is this really long bolt here, right there. And once you do that, then you can just tighten up the two bolts in the transmission, go ahead and pull it together, and take your jack out. Well, I should say lower your transmission jack, get it out of there, and you are good. Now the only issue I had, that takes a little fiddling with, sometimes my transmission jack, I built this wooden platform because the platform that it came with is this little metal thing, and transmissions don't like to sit on that, so I made me a wooden box and bolted it on the platform. Sometimes the wooden platform will hit the frame and the transmission won't go any higher. Next thing I know, I'm lifting the whole car. So what I have to do sometimes, and you might have to, is put some blocks of wood under the transmission, set it up a little higher than your box or your transmission bottom of it there. What I'm trying to say is you might have to put some wood under your transmission to angle it a certain way, sort of like this, to get it bolted on the engine. And let's see. Then once you do that, you can go ahead and jack it up and all that. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and tighten those 3 bolts up there, and jack my transmission up a little bit more, and put the big bolt there in, and then all I have to do is go under here and start a couple of torque convertibles, make sure they're going to go in straight, and then the hard part's done. Just go ahead and finish up. So I hope this made sense to you guys. This is just a rough video of how I'm putting this transmission in, this 3.0. So let me go ahead and do that and put the motor mount bolt in, and I'll come back here and give you some more tips and updates. Alright, now I got all my bolts tight there, and I got my bolt hole lined up there. I don't know if you can see that. Get the bolt in there, and all I got to do now is go ahead and tighten that up, and that's in. And now all I have to do is lower this transmission jack. And the transmission's in, and you can see it slowly dropping down. And that makes it a lot easier. So let me get up under here and show you a couple more things. Now on the motor, I did have a few blocks, and I had it was just there to kind of help me lift the motor up and down a little bit to align that transmission. But I can now take these this jack out and take this out real quick here. Maybe you can see it, maybe not. But I can go ahead and take these blocks out. It just made it a little easier for me to manage the transmission and stuff, bolting it together. And let's see, I will put a bolt back here in the back in there. I think you can see that. And I can actually take my fingers, and I can get in behind the flywheel. And it's really easy to turn. Don't know if you're going to be able to see me do this. If I put my hand back behind the flywheel, I can turn it torque converter really easy. I think you can see that there a little bit. It's really, that way I can align these bolt holes up with the torque converter. This is why I always paint things when I take things apart, because you know exactly where it goes. You know exactly how it goes back. And there's paint on the torque converter, which is behind there, and I should be able to get that bolt lined up with the flywheel. So I'm going to go ahead and stick a couple more bolts in it, go ahead and mate this, and we'll just start putting it back together. And like I said, the axle, it was easy for me just to pop that axle in. Believe it or not, the transmission was easier to put in than to take out. Because once I dropped it, it hit the frame right here. Then I had to wrestle around with the bottom of the motor a little bit, jack it up, and separate the motor and transmission. But the only bad thing is you might end up tearing your seal. But if you just take your time and get the axle started in there, you should be okay. My seal seems to be okay, and I've got an extra one just in case. This just saves about an hour's worth of work. And like I said, if I had more room in my garage, I probably would have taken that axle out, but I don't have a lot of room, so I just did the axle on the driver's side. All right, I'll go ahead and put a few bolts in here. We'll come back and give you a few more updates. All right, I got that nut in, the bolt in, I should say, on the back side there near the rear axle. And if you go on this side, you notice how my paint mark lines up evenly with the torque converter that I painted. That means it's going to be great. I mean, all I have to do is grab my flywheel bolt here. I think you still see that. I got the light and angle. I'll just do it this way. And putting these bolts in are no issue whatsoever. And I can simply take a screwdriver and just turn this torque converter on the teeth. And see, I can just turn that, and I can get all those bolts in there, no problem. So that shows you, if you can do that, your transmission's in right. There's no binding, and you won't have an issue. And there's the other bolt that's getting ready to line up. Bolt hole there for the torque converter bolt, and vice versa. You know, the other two on top, I'll spin that around, and we'll get the other ones. Like I said, this is not a 100% how to do it, how to put it back together, but just a bunch of tips. If you want to do this job, it's not too bad. So now I'll go ahead and put all the torque converter bolts in and go up on top, put some bolts in, and probably put the axle in it and all that, and we'll have too much more to do here. So my bolts on the top of the transmission in, they were real easy to do. There's that tube that has that water supply line going into the heater core. There are two bolts into that go into that transmission. It's kind of hard to see. They're hidden into that exhaust, but they're in. And there's one down on that motor mount. See if I can get the light just right where you can see that. And right there, that one there. And there's one on this side, which is right about there, right there. Those two are pretty easy to get to too. They're just little short bolts. You can rock the transmission back and forth with your hand and start those, and they go in real easy. And let's see, and that's about all there is up here. What I have to do now is go underneath and There's a couple of little bolts under here. I've just about got, I believe. Move my light off to the side. Back up under here. I've got that bolt there, like I said earlier, right there. That's in. When I tightened that up and tightened this one up on this side, it pulled the transmission and the engine together perfectly. And I've got one. You got one more right here on this back bracket, right there. You gotta remember those 3 bolts in this back transmission mount. People forget about one of them and they leave it in and they can't get the transmission out. And they're fighting and cussing and they have issues. So once you get the first 2 on the top end, this one here goes in pretty easy. The hole's aligned and I can usually just start it in with my fingers and like that. Well, I can't hold the hand camera at the same time, but it's, there we go. It'll eventually start in there. There we go. And all I gotta do is tighten that up, and I still gotta do a couple torque converter bolts, and put the starter on. Let me kind of back out of the way here. We'll get the starter on, but what you gotta do is snake that starter wire across through here, then put that mount here on, because if you watch my other video, that starter nut is seized on there, the hot wire, and I didn't want to break it off the solenoid, so I just left it attached, and it's hanging on my spindle right here. I've got it all kind of together as one unit with that wiring harness. And you got to remember, you got your little sensor right here, your crank sensor, that's also attached to that wiring harness. So what I will do, I'll just lay a wiring harness across here with the starter first, then put the bracket here on for the front transmission mount, which is right there, because that wiring harness goes over top of it. And if I could get that wiring harness disconnected from the solenoid, I wouldn't have that issue. So that's just, you know, I'm not going to worry about breaking a nut on a solenoid. And really, that's about it. I'm going to put a new gasket on the transmission pan and put it back together. It's not a hard transmission to work on and take out. You just got to remember, when you pull it out, before you pull it out, you have to disconnect this guy right here, your crank sensor, which sits in the back, because people break them all the time. And since I'm up here, I'll just show you the starter real quick. The wire that I'm telling you, right there, you can see that. See the hot wire goes on that solenoid? It's rusted on there, and I tried to get it off, but it's just going to break, and I don't want to have to deal with it. There's nothing wrong with the starter. I may deal with that later down the road, but see, this wiring harness is one long wiring harness right there. It goes all the way under the transmission. So, all right, so let me go ahead and, I guess, tighten up a few more bolts underneath of it and put the axles in it, and I guess that'll be about it. Hopefully this will help you guys out a little bit anyway. All right, rolling right along. So far I've spent about an hour and a half on everything. I've got my dust cover back on, and you can see how it kind of bolts on. Interesting, you got this stud here that kind of bolts on the transmission, then this bracket goes on top of the stud, then there's a nut on top of that, and then your starter kind of fits in there, and there's the wiring harness that snakes up over this bracket there. I just left this motor mount right here off so I can slide the wire up over that, and then when I put this motor mount right there on, I think you can see that wiring harness, I won't have to worry about it. It's already up there, and there's that long wire that goes back to the crank sensor. I'll fish it up over the top of the transmission and hook it up. So one other interesting thing here I can show you that will help you guys out if you want to take a starter off. The bolts on the starter, they're all 15, and I usually just kind of start them like that, pull the starter back a little bit, start them in all the same, then tighten each one of them up at the same time, because you don't have a lot of room between the bolt there and the back of this transmission. So you can get a 15mm socket in there and ratchet, that's about it. And tighten that up, and really, there's not a whole lot left to do here, just the axle and a few things. But the starter could be a little tedious, so you got to take your time and you got to kind of pull the starter back away from the transmission there, and that will give you enough room to get in there with the socket. Because if you try to push that starter all the way up against the transmission, them bolts are so far out you can't get your socket on it. The transmission will get in your way. So I think I explained that the best I know how. So sorry if I did, if you don't understand, but like I said, this is just a rough update on the transmission install. So I'll go ahead and tighten that up, and we got to hook up a couple of wiring harnesses here, which is no big deal. Do that up on top, and we'll wrap this up. So I think about the total time for this entire install, an hour and a half to maybe 2 hours to put this transmission in by myself, so it wasn't too bad. Like I said, it was harder taking it out, getting hung up on that frame right there. And that's about it. So we'll go ahead and finish up here. Well, I had to back up a step. I forgot to put a bracket on right there. I forgot about to put this guy on, if I can say that 10 times fast. So I pulled the starter back off and put that bracket on there. Then the starter goes back on, but you can see the setup there, how it's kind of on there like that. The bracket goes on the back up to the top. Then your other bracket on the side up to the front motor mount goes like that, and your starter sits in there. So, and now I can go ahead and put my starter back in there. Don't forget to hook your oil sending unit wire up, and make sure you tighten all your bolts up. So I ain't got too much more to do. After I tighten all this up and put the starter on it, then I'll go ahead and put this motor mount there on, which will be pretty easy to do, and hook some wires up. But I just wanted to go back and look at this. Almost forgot to put that bracket on there, so pretty important to get that on there, you know. Factory thinks it should be there. I guess you should put it there. Alright, everything's done on the bottom. Get the starter on. Make sure I got my brackets in the right place. These brackets are really just complicated how they have those on there. So you have to kind of pay attention. Make sure you put them in the right order. If you don't, you have to take them apart and redo them. And there's even one on the back here. There's a bracket there that goes up to the side of the motor. 3 bolts. One there, and there are 2 up there. I think you can see those right there. One there and one down there. So once we got that's everything underneath is done. So we're talking about maybe 2 hours total time. And now all I have to do is just hook up a few wires here and hook my cable up and put my crank sensor back down there, bolt it in, which it is kind of sitting, hiding on me there, of course. Sitting down here. I think I can pull it up. And there it is. We have to stick that in there. Make sure it's clean when you take it out and it's not broken or anything. Mine looks okay. And that's about it. So about 2 hours worth of work, and hopefully this will help you out. This will give you some idea what you got to do when you put the transmission in. And on this side, got the mounts in, the bolt in, the bracket there for the motor mount. And there's the side of it, and like I said, I just got a couple plugs to hook up, and I'll start it up tomorrow and be driving it. But I'm going to finish this intake tomorrow, put that on there, put some valve gaskets on here, valve pan gaskets, and start driving it. So thanks for watching. There you go. Update on the old 3.0 transmission install. Have any questions? I'll try to answer them. Good luck, and thanks for watching. Until next time, later.